"Sir, step away from the fire pit and put your hands where I can see them." That was the first thing I heard as I turned, a half-melted marshmallow clinging to the stick in my hand, flashlights stabbing through the pines, red and blue lights winking across the lake. 2 officers moved up the shore, one hand near a holster, and for a second I thought this was a joke. I said calm, because kids watch you for clues, "I'm just camping." And one of them barked, "We got a call from the HOA president. Ma'am says you're trespassing on private land." That's when I stood up, brushed pine needles off my flannel, and smirked. Because sometimes a smirk does more work than shouting. "Look around," I said. "This lake, these trees, that dock I fixed. They've been in my family since my grandpa put the first post in the ground. Name's Tom Walker. And I brought my 12-year-old, Harper, out here for a weekend under the stars because after losing my wife 3 years ago, keeping my grandfather's ranch felt like holding on to them both. I promised no phones, no obligations, just the lake he called Mirror Point, where the sky seems to kiss the water, but Oak Glen Estates have been treating it like their private party spot for years. That night, Linda Masters, pearls, clipboard, and a posture like she wrote the bylaws herself, marched up with 2 board members and started reciting HOA regulations as if they could reach across a fence and prescribe how our land should be used. Harper clutched my sleeve. I kept my voice low and told Linda to check her maps. She said they'd call the police. 10 minutes later, the cruisers arrived, and the place where Grandpa taught me to bait a hook felt suddenly like ground zero. I handed an officer my laminated deed. I carry it because when you own dirt, people test you, and watched his eyebrows climb. "You're saying the HOA's been using your land?" I nodded. They'd hosted barbecues, built docks, charged for members only access to a lake that, on paper, belonged to the Walkers. Then a kid screamed, Harper's eyes went wide, and from the trees a crowd emerged, phones raised, neighbors filming. Someone shouted, "We'll get you arrested." Another waved a pamphlet that claimed lakeside access belonged to Oak Glen. I told them, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Enjoy the last of your lake parties, because tomorrow morning you'll get letters on your doors, official notice that you're on someone else's land." Silence dropped like a hood. Then a truck rolled up, and out stepped my uncle, Darrell, the man who'd sold a portion of the ranch years ago. He told a version of the story where handshakes and fuzzy surveys made the northern shore theirs. Family history, I learned, can be an accordion, stretched and shaped until it fits someone else's tune. If your own blood isn't sure what you own, the world becomes harder to prove to strangers. That night we found evidence of something darker than boundary disputes, scraps of burned invoices, forged meeting notes, and a trail leading to a bulldozer that had cleared junk near the shore. Sharon, the HOA treasurer, had been standing in the dark with a map. Someone cracked a wooden crate, and the word burn was whispered. They were erasing their own paper trail. I called Wes, an old friend and attorney, and he told me to bag everything. By morning we had photos, charred papers, and leads, but also a suit and tie at the dock, a man named Peter Langley with a briefcase offering peace if I signed a memorandum giving them shared access. They thought a signature could buy silence. I refused. At the county records office, June, a clerk who remembered my grandfather pulled dusty surveys and told me the worst possible middle ground. The northern half of the lake had been used and taxed under my family's name at times, but the deed's legal description didn't spell it out. "File a quiet title," she said. "Prove long use, maintenance, payments, get a judge to confirm it. Until then, anyone could claim prescriptive rights." Then the plot turned. Someone phoned me from inside the HOA with a shaky voice. "I have the original file that proves the land wasn't donated to Oak Glen. Linda's coming for it tonight." We followed Linda to the clubhouse and watched her carry a manila envelope while a hooded figure across the street filmed. That figure dropped a flash drive like a breadcrumb and bolted. The flash drive was everything. Survey reports from 15 years back, internal emails, a chain where board members discussed normalizing their use to claim adverse possession later. One email said move or destroy the records if Tom got nosy. It read like a blueprint for fraud. We handed the drive to the sheriff. Metadata matched an anonymous county backup lodged that morning. For once the sheriff's face hardened when it looked at Linda. Then the clubhouse burned. Alarms, flames licking through columns. Neighbors gathered, and a hooded figure vanished into smoke. Turns out vanished didn't mean gone. It meant someone with nerves enough to act. Later, we cornered a kid behind the clubhouse who turned out to be Kyle, Sharon's son, pale and shaking, the one who'd scanned old records and kept a copy of a notarized letter Grandpa Walker had written, temporary access for emergency use only. The property remains under Walker deed. Not HOA jurisdiction. It was stamped, dated, and the sort of thing that makes a judge sit up straight. With Kyle's letter and the flash drive, the threads unraveled. Henry Lewis, the surveyor who'd been fired years ago for refusing to falsify maps, mailed original, signed blueprints that showed the lake excluded from Oak Glen's parcel. The developer's name stamped on early plans. Chadwick Sons Development Group connected the HOA to corporate interests selling lakeside access as a perk that wasn't theirs. This wasn't neighborly overreach. It was a marketing scam built on somebody else's water. The state moved in. Oak Glen's HOA accounts froze. Linda was charged with obstruction and false claims. Sharon cooperated. Chadwick's development arm found itself under inquiry. The county issued a freeze on HOA activities around Mirror Point, and for the first time in months the dock felt like mine again. But there was one last twist. Someone dug under the old trail and found water pipes feeding Oak Glen subdivision, clandestine connections that had siphoned my lake for years. They've been using my water to keep manicured lawns green while selling private lake access as a paid amenity. We legally rerouted those pipes, and lawns went yellow where water had once been generously stolen. The courtroom part felt oddly theatrical. Not because of lights and cameras, but because ordinary documents can sound like thunder when read aloud. We spent days in hearings where maps rolled out like scrolls and experts spoke in a language that made me glad for Wes's steady voice. Henry Lewis described how he refused to fudge a line. His hand shook as he pointed to the original stamped map that didn't match Oak Glen's glossy brochure. Neighbors testified about barbecues and kids swimming off a dock someone else built. Those small details knitted into a case that smelled of calculated greed. Meetings where minutes had been rewritten, invoices that didn't match dates, a plot to sell lakeside access that wasn't theirs. The state attorney convened a grand jury, and subpoenas started to expose bank transfers and internal emails. When the press came, homeowners who'd never read a deed began asking questions. We took hits too. Sharon's messy resignation, Linda's ugly arrest, the clubhouse ash lingering like a wound. But the evidence was heavy. Original maps, the flash drive, my grandfather's notarized letter. Chadwick's lawyers filed countersuits, but momentum was with truth. Kyle entered witness protection. Henry mailed his original maps. The county froze HOA accounts and issued an oversight. Life settled into a different normal after the freeze order. Harper learned to bait a hook without looking to me for permission. We planted native flowers by the dock. I started a tiny learning center from a hand-me-down bookshelf where kids learn how to read legal descriptions and why a line on a map can mean food, safety, or swindled trust. Sometimes late in summer we anchor the boat, and the moon makes a silver ladder across the water. Harper leans into me and says, "You did good, Dad," and that's a verdict that matters more than any signed paper. My grandfather's final note, "Don't sell the lake, protect the heart," felt like a promise I could finally keep. If you've ever had to stand up for a place or a promise, tell us. Share your story. I read every comment. Now tell me, when does standing your ground tip into spite? When is defending a right righteous? And when does it slip into petty revenge? Drop a comment, tell a story you won't mind sharing. And if this pulled at you, share it with someone who needs to hear that polite silence can be costly. Let's talk about justice, truth, and the small fights that mean the most.